Rev up your engines!
Balthazar Soul says thoughts on the 94 Toyota pickup with rebuilt manual transmission and rebuilt engine. Oh, they're great vehicles. Who rebuilt them? I see a lot of guys say, oh, that's rebuilt. Yeah, rebuilt straight out of a junkyard. They spray clean them with a hose and then spray paint them with paint to make them look shiny, and away they go. You want proof that these things actually were rebuilt. Like here in Houston, if somebody said it was a rebuilt transmission, I'd say, who did it? Now, if it was somebody like my friends at McAfee Standard Transmissions, I'd say, hey, yeah, they do a great job. No problem. And same thing with the engine. Who rebuilt it? And I've seen people buy rebuilt engines, and you pull the oil pan off, they're full of sludge. The only thing they did was buy them from a junkyard, steam clean them, and spray paint them. And the insides weren't touched, though. You gotta have proof that the stuff was actually done by somebody you can talk to and see what kind of a reputation they have and that they actually did the work. Because a lot of people talk the talk, but when it comes down to actually doing the work, it's either not done right or not even done at all. Donald Croce says, Honda Passport versus Lexus RX 350. Oh, I wouldn't even compare them to Lexus. Is such a better built vehicle. You know, of course, on the other hand, let's say you're buying a used one that's got lower mileage on it. You're going to be able to pick up the Passport heck of a lot cheaper than you're going to be able to pick up the used Lexus. They hold their value. I've often had customers bring me them, and I'll say, look, I'm not a fan of those things by any stretch of the imagination, the Hondas. You can get used ones with low mileage so much cheaper than others. Go ahead and buy one if a mechanic says it's good. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you compare them as actual vehicles, you can't even compare them to Lexus. It's such a better made vehicle than that Honda is anyways. Andrew Nice of Scotty, what are your thoughts on when Dodge and Shelby made cars? Those were some weird cars. Like, they had that Shelby of the little four-cylinder Chrysler. Ugly little things. It was like their copy of the Volkswagen Rabbit. I mean, they were terrible cars. They went fast until they blew up. That was a deal where, you know, they're trying to build on the Shelby, use the Shelby name to sell their Dodge, and that was when Chrysler was in real trouble. They were making junk nobody wanted to buy. I mean, I don't think they're such great cars. They were interesting for the speed and what they were going to do, but really, most of them don't have any resale value these days because they were such financial flops that people don't want to, and those four-cylinder ones that they made, they were so ugly, nobody wants to drive them around. They look terrible, you know. Even with some of the horrible designs out today, those things were even worse. Par 3 plays says, Scotty, I got a 2013 Mazda 3. The brake pedal feels soft. I bled the systems. After I bled them, they were firm for 2 weeks, got soft again. If you have done no work on the system and you got soft brakes and you bleed them and they get hard and they get soft again, you got a leak somewhere that's sucking air in. Normally, bleeding brakes won't fix anything unless you've opened the system, got air in it, or if there's something letting air get in the system. There's no reason to bleed a brake system if it's never been worked on, if there's nothing wrong, because there's nothing wrong. Yours somehow is sucking air in. The most common thing is a bad master cylinder that sucks air, because most other things, if they've got a leak, they're going to be leaking out. Not only are they going to suck air, but they're going to squirt air out too. And with the master cylinder, they can often leak internally and you won't see any leaks, but then it'll build it up. I'd guess the master cylinder. That'd be the first thing I'd do on something like that. I'd just change that. They're not all that expensive. Not that hard to change on a vehicle like that either. Anthony Barbosa says, 51 years as a mechanic, what haven't you worked on? Well, I haven't worked on any of those crazy little cars they sell in Asia because they don't import them here, those little micro cars, because they don't import them over here, so I've never worked on it. But I mean, I worked on Rolls Royces, Porsches, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. I hated working on those exotic cars. They were a pain in the butt. But most cars, as long as you can get parts for them in the United States, I'll work on them to a certain extent. But I'll also tell people, let's say they got a mid-engine Porsche and you got to pull the engine to do work. I won't do it. I'll say, hey, I know Porsche guys that work on these all the time, but, you know, just bend over and start throwing money at them because they're going to want a ton of it to work on a mid-engine car like that. I've even worked on old Renaults from, you know, the turn of the century, turn of the 18s to the 1900s. My grandfather had a customer who had one when I was a kid, and it was a cool old car. I'll work on them as long as I get parts for them, you know. It doesn't bother me. Lawrence says, Scotty, would you buy a Camry made in the USA? Actually, I have, but I'm so cheap I always buy used ones. I bought for my wife a Toyota Camry station wagon, a blue one. It was beautiful, and it was made in Kentucky. Now, I only paid a couple $1,000s for it. It had 70,000 miles, and she liked the car. The AC blew cold. I gave it to my first son. He learned to drive on it. I gave it to my second son. He learned to drive on it. Then I got it back, and I ended up selling to a girl who joined the Peace Corps and drove it to California, and I don't know what happened to it after that. So that was a decent build. You know, they're not quite as well made as the Japanese ones, but they're still decent made and they could last a long time. Cyber Pixel says, how reliable would you say are the Pontiac Firebirds? Well, you know, they were real reliable back in the day. One of my friends had one he bought for $1,000 with it was a big deal then, at a 4-barrel carburetor, V8 engine, and a 4-speed standard transmission. Most people had 3 speeds, that had a 4 speeds. Man, did that thing use up gas when he floored it and opened up all 4 barrels. But it was a well-made, solid vehicle. As time went on, you know, they started making them cheaper and cheaper. GM parts, and they got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But originally, they were really good muscle cars, if you didn't mind spending a lot of money on gasoline. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.